I'm glad we finally got it to work. Sorry about the technical difficulties that we had there for a minute, but glad to be here. Glad to be doing this, and glad to kind of get to talk to you guys in a little bit of a different form than I used to with the podcast and stuff, and now kind of trying to do this in order to feel like I'm kind of getting a little more outreach and kind of talking about multiple different things. I obviously my following is mainly from the Yankees, but obviously I have many different sports interests. Huge Giant fan, Knicks fan, along with the Yankees, and always kind of been a fan of New York sports, been a fan of WFAN, and listening to Mike Francesa as a kid and all those people. So glad that I could finally kind of do something like this myself and talk about not just the Yankees, even though I care about that a lot, and we will still obviously talk about the Yankees a lot, but also just New York sports as a whole, as we got obviously a lot going on in the New York sports landscape here. Just wanted to see if I'm live here. Let's see if the live is working. Yeah, it seems like it is. Seems like it's working now, which is good. Um, yeah, so let's get straight into it. So a few things we wanted to go through today. First one is Hal Steinbrenner. Obviously, Hal Steinbrenner. Um, Speaking to um, the media this week, and obviously a lot that he said that I wanted to get into, and we'll obviously go into the Giants with their coaching search and Mike Kafka and being the interim and Shane Bowen being fired. We'll get all the way into that and kind of try to figure some things out there with the Giants. Obviously, another miserable season at 2-10, and then we'll talk about the Mets a little bit, trading one of their I would say most popular players, Brandon Nimmo, and for Marcus Simeon, and kind of how that affects the coaching search as at large here as we go forward in the MLB offseason. Just want to see here if I can open the chat. Sorry, kind of doing this on the fly a little bit here. Uh, Trying to see just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Um, let's see. Okay, yeah, I think we're good. Um, yeah, so let's get into Hal's quotes a little bit, and I had a few thoughts that I just kind of wanted to parse out as to some of the quotes that he went through and said. Um, and listen, I think it's a. I'm not going to get into on this live stream talking about Hal Steinbrenner and he's got to spend more money, and I think that the Yankees every year have a very high payroll. And I think that because they have a very high payroll, your number one critique of Hal, I don't think, should be, well, the Yankees need to spend more money. I think they do need to spend more money, and I think we've seen over the years that they're spending up there with the top teams, but maybe not above the top teams. But the bigger issue is they're not spending the money correctly. But I think my number one problem with Hal is that he is just completely aloof to anything that's going on. He is completely just, he has no knowledge of the game of baseball. And you see it in his quotes that he says things that if he actually kind of knew what he was talking about, you would have seen severe changes for the Yankees over the last number of years. You would have seen many changes made, and I'll kind of read through some of the quotes that he's had in that press conference. And the first one, he was asked, I believe, from John Heyman. He was asked about how much money the payroll was going to be this year, and were the Yankees going to potentially cut payroll. And he was going into, well, actually, excuse me. So the question was, are the Yankees profitable? And that was a big topic of conversation with Hal. Are the Yankees profitable, and kind of what is going on there? And he gave a response where basically he kind of said, look, I wouldn't assume that we're profitable. He basically said the Yankees are not profitable, which is a whole nother conversation. But in response to that question, the quote he said is, he was talking about how much money the Yankees spend in terms of expenses. And he said, nobody spends more money on player development, scouting, and performance science. So when you think about that quote, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to laugh, right? So the Yankees spend more money on player development than any other team. Well, my next question, if I was a reporter to Hal, would be, well, Hal, then why have the Yankees struggled mightily to develop players, particularly offensive players, over the past 10 seasons? Obviously, Aaron Judge came up in 2017. Or 2016, excuse me. Now we're in 2026, going into 2026. And have the Yankees developed another really good hitter? I think Ben Rice has some potential. He had a good year last year. We'll see this year if he could follow that up. But this idea that, we spend more money on player development, well, don't you see that that's a problem then as the owner of the team? Anthony Volpe steps back. Austin Wells steps back. Guys across the board just not living up to their expectations. And yet you say you spend more you spend more on player development than any other team. So again, it's just aloof, right? It's like you spend more on player development than any other team, but you have some of the worst offensive player development in the sport. So that's the first quote that didn't really make much sense. Second one was talking about the payroll. And I know I mentioned the payroll the first time, but this question was actually about the payroll, where he was asked, okay, is payroll going to go down? Or is there a range or whatever? And his response was, would it be ideal if it went down? Of course. But does that mean it's going to happen? Of course not. This one might take the cake as the most bizarre, right? Why, as the owner of the team, you're speaking to the fans, right? I mean, now maybe he's not speaking to the fans. Maybe he's speaking to his minority stakeholders. I don't know who he's speaking to. Really, I don't. But this idea that, why would you say in a press conference that it would be ideal if payroll goes down? Just why say it? If I'm trying to put myself in Hal's shoes. If you're Hal Steinbrenner, why are you saying, we want payroll ideally to go down? Well, what does that mean? I mean, ideally, you'd want a lot of things. You're running a team that has not won a championship in 15 years after being a team that, it had been, in every decade prior to the 2010s, the Yankees had won a World Series, right? The 2000s, 1990s, etc. Now you're going on potentially your second decade without winning a World Series. The 2010s, you didn't win one, and now the 2020s are halfway done, and you haven't won one. Why are you saying ideally we'd cut payroll? I don't get it. Ideally you'd cut payroll? I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean, ideally you'd cut payroll? It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I just try to put myself in Hal's shoes. What is he trying to get across there? I don't understand. You're the owner of the Yankees. There's an obligation to win. There's an obligation to put the best team on the field. And then in the same breath, you kind of say, well, it's going to go up anyway, but ideally it would go down. No one wants to hear that. No Yankee fan wants to hear the owner of the team say that. And it just continues to show Hal Steinbrenner kind of digging his own grave a little bit, and it just doesn't make any sense that he's saying those things. The third one that I found interesting, and this is another really funny one. He was talking about, I think Jack Curry, I believe, asked him kind of what were his likes, what were his dislikes from the last season, from the 2025 season, and he said, he said for the things he likes, he says, the team was close knit, they were close together, you never felt they were out of the game, all those things. Then when he gets into what he didn't like about the team, he says, I didn't like that 6 to 7 week period we had where we were making mistakes, not playing good baseball, not hitting. That can't happen every year, in my opinion. Well, Hal, Are you watching the team? It happens every year. That 6 to 7 week period happened in 2022. It happened in 2021. It happened to a lesser extent in 2020. It happened in 2018. It's happened almost every year of the Aaron Boone era outside of pretty much 2019. Even in 2024, when you made the World Series, you were unwatchable for 2 months. He says that can't happen every year, in my opinion. But it does happen every year. So I just don't quite get what he's trying to accomplish with this press conference. I don't understand it. Like, you say things that are so obvious, and yet you don't do anything about it. Your response is, well, we saw that base running was an issue, so we changed the first base coach. You think that's going to change the base running? The first base coach. There's not even a thought, like, maybe the manager is a problem here? Maybe Aaron Boone, who kind of runs a lackadaisical clubhouse, maybe it's Aaron Boone's fault that the Yankees have base running gaffes every year, that they go 2 months, that they have the June swoon every year. Has Hal ever even thought that it might be an Aaron Boone problem? So, quite frankly, I just didn't understand Hal's press conference. I didn't get the point of it. I don't get why he thought it was, now was an appropriate time to speak. He didn't speak after the season ended. He hadn't spoke the entire season. I just don't understand why he thought now was an appropriate time to give the press conference. It didn't make any sense to me. Okay, so next topic, we will go into the Giants now, which there's definitely a lot here. Giants coaching search, and there's a couple points I wanted to hit here that I wrote down. So obviously the big news of the last couple of days is that Mike Kafka and the organization fired Shane Bowen, and he was relieved of his duties as defensive coordinator. The Giants blew yet another 10-point fourth quarter lead. It's becoming a record. They've blown 3 fourth quarter leads of 10 or more points on the road this season against all teams that are going to make the playoffs, by the way. In the Broncos, the Bears, and the Lions, all presumptive playoff teams. They had 10-point leads. They blew 10-point leads. And I saw something great from Justin Pennick, who does a great job for talking Giants, that if the Giants season, if the Giants played every game 58 minutes, if every game the Giants played was 58 minutes, the Giants would be a 6-6 team instead of the 2-10 record that they have. So they would have 4 more wins if the games were played 58 minutes instead of 60 minutes. But of course, unfortunately for us Giant fans, the games are 60 minutes. The team is 2-10. The Shane Bowen situation was a disaster situation. Shane Bowen should. I think there's an argument that Shane Bowen should have never been hired as defensive coordinator after the 2023 season when Wink Martindale was replaced. And we'll get back to Wink in a second, but after Wink was replaced, Shane Bowen came in. Bowen obviously had experience in Tennessee. He had some solid defenses there, some really good run defenses, which obviously did not translate to New York in terms of the run defense. Giants had an historically bad run defense. But I think what I want to kind of get across here is, who's to blame for the Shane Bowen situation? Who's to blame for the fact that the Giants this year, in a season where the premise of the season was, okay, look, if the Giants are going to be, the Giants will be a good team if the offense kind of outperforms its expectation. Because everybody and their mother in training camp was like, man, this defense is going to be a top 15, top 10 defense. Everybody was saying that. Everybody. And the defense not only is not top 10, top 10, top 15, they're the worst defense in the NFL. Literally the worst. So I think it's important to kind of parse out whose fault is it for Shane Bowen. And everybody wants to blame Joe Shane for everything these days. And I'm not sitting here telling you I love Joe Shane. I'm not an ardent Joe Shane supporter. But everybody we want to blame Joe Shane for the Kennedy assassination. Like, we want to blame Joe Shane for everything. To me, the Shane Bowen saga, to me, it's a 75%. If I'm assigning blame, we're doing the blame pie. To me, 75% of that blame goes to Brian Daboll, and 25% goes to Joe Schoen. Here's Joe Schoen's blame in the Shane Bowen situation. Shane went out in the offseason and he added players on the defensive line, really the last 2 years, players on the defensive line that are good pass rushing defensive tackles. You look at Darius Alexander, who had 2 sacks on Sunday. You look at Nacho, Raheem Nunez-Roches. You look at Roy Robertson-Harris. These are good pass rushing defensive tackles. What he didn't do is is bring in run stoppers. He completely neglected inside linebacker. Bobby Okereke has very little good football left in him. And the second linebacker position has no depth. Once Micah McFadden went down in the opener against Washington, the Giants were basically cooked on defense. And basically, Joe Schoen did not bring in enough guys to stop the run. And the Giants' personnel, I think, is really lacking in terms of stopping the run. That said, after last season, the 2024 season, when the Giants were miserably bad, 3-14 season, John Mara, the owner, came out. The owner of the team came out and said, I was tired of our defense, getting teams moving up and down the field on our defense. That right there should have been the number one blinking light in Brian Daboll's head. Oh, here's my reprieve opportunity. I could fire Shane Bowen now. He chose to stick with him. Not only did he choose to stick with him, he chose to stick with him after the Dallas collapse, where the Giants took the lead with 30 seconds to go and they blew the lead. Aubrey kicked the 60-something yard field goal. And they played the soft zone and let him get into field goal range when you knew he had a big leg. The Denver game where you gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter, that didn't fire him either. Joe Schoen did not force Brian Daboll to bring Shane Bowen back, let alone keep him this year. He didn't force him to do that. As we know, the staff with the Giants is very much, as it is with most teams, predicated on the head coach. The head coach picks his staff, right? So Brian Daboll brought in Wink Martindale. That was Brian Daboll. In 2022, the Giants were a winning team. They won. They were a playoff team. A lot of those games they won at the end because of Wink and his defense. Fast forward to the next season, the Giants are worse. They're worse defensively. And Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale clashed heads. He couldn't get along with Wink. And it ended up not working out. And Wink leaves the team, basically. He walked out, essentially, at the end of the season. So Wink Martindale probably could still be this team's defensive coordinator today. But Brian Daboll screwed it up. That's not on Joe Schoen. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That is not on Joe Schoen. That is on Brian Daboll. It's on Brian Daboll to hire Shane Bowen. It's on Brian Daboll to retain Shane Bowen after the 2024 season. And it's on Brian Daboll that he didn't fire him. There's no way you can tell me that if Brian Daboll went to Joe Schoen or John Mara or whoever is the powers that be and said, look, I think I got a good offense here. I got a good young quarterback in Jackson Dart. I want to fire the defensive coordinator. He obviously would have been able to do that. He didn't. And now he's out of a job. So I just want to get that across. The Shane Bowen situation is Brian Daboll's fault. The fact that Shane Bowen kind of wrecked this season, that's on Brian Daboll. With the coaching search, and obviously we don't know exactly where this is going to go. I really have two thoughts that are kind of separate. And I think as someone who I think the Giants are a very tough organization to figure out, because I think unless you're, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I am a season ticket holder. I go to the games. I feel like, and believe me, some of these losses have been tough to swallow. I mean, winning very few home games the last 2 years. I'm very in tune with kind of what's going on, I think, and kind of the dynamics of the building and the dynamics of the organization. So I have two thoughts on the Mike Kafka thing. The first thought is, if the Giants were running a real coaching search, and keep that in mind, real coaching search. If the Giants were running a real coaching search, Mike Kafka should have no consideration. None. What qualifies Mike Kafka more than Brian Daboll? All I heard after Sunday's loss to the Lions was, wow, what a well-coached game by Mike Kafka. Wow, look how he schemed it up. Look at these open receivers. He did a good job with the scheme. To me, it was a carbon copy of the Brian Daboll games. Like, Brian Daboll, the game that got him fired, against the Bears, he went into Chicago, a team that is 8-3 currently. He went into Chicago. He was down Adebo. He was down Scadaboo. He was down Neighbors. He was down all those guys. Now, he had Dart, but to be honest with you, Jameis Winston played unbelievable football on Sunday. So I don't really know if Dart can play any better than that, quite frankly, at this stage in Dart's development. He led by 10 points in the fourth quarter on the road in Chicago and then blew the game. Fast forward to this Sunday, the Giants lead by 10 points on the road in the fourth quarter against the playoff team, and they blow the game. And part of why they blow the game is Mike Kafka's play calling. Down there at the 2-yard line, or you had first and goal at the 3-yard line, I think, when you were up 3, and then they obviously ended up going for fourth down. They didn't get it. The play calling there was not good. They ran the ball the first down play, which was a smart call. They get a yard. Then they run a play-action fake, low-percentage throw. Jameis throws it to Theo Johnson, incomplete. Then on third down, they run the ball again, and they lose like 3 yards. And then they go for it on fourth down. They don't get it. I don't even have a problem going for it on fourth down because you know how bad your defense is. But I just don't get the sequence of play calling there. And we've seen this with Daboll, too. The sequencing of the play calling at the end of these games doesn't make sense. And you look at last week with Mike Kafka, he had a lead in the fourth quarter against the Packers, and he blew that lead. This is what was happening with Daboll. No one is arguing that Brian Daboll's not a good offensive mind. I think he is. I think he's proven that. But he's not a good head coach. And I think what you have to talk about with Mike Kafka is Mike Kafka's not a good head coach. Now, he's only had 2 games, and there's going to be 5 games to go, and we'll see. But I'm here to tell you that Mike Kafka's candidacy should not be determined by the last 5 games of this season. Because the Giants this Monday play against the Patriots, who are a great team, 10-2, they're having a great year. The next 3 games the Giants play are against Washington, who might be playing a backup quarterback, J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings, who look awful right now, and the Raiders, who might be the worst team in the NFL. So if the Giants win those 3 games, you're going to give Mike Kafka the job over 3 meaningless games against bad teams? It again is backward thinking. It's why the Giants in a lot of ways are at this point, because they look at games in late November and December when they're out of it and they say, wow, that's, the Giants are they make decisions based on those games. They say, wow, look at Eli Manning. You look great in that game against the Eagles when the team was 2-12 at the end of the 2017 season, and then they proceed to not draft a quarterback in the 2018 draft, in the Darnold, Baker, Josh Allen draft, Lamar Jackson as well. So we should not be basing Mike Kafka's candidacy on the last 5 games of the season. Mike Kafka has a resume. Mike Kafka's from the Andy Reid tree. That's good. Andy Reid is probably the best coach in football. Here's what's not good. Under Mike Kafka's been the offensive coordinator 4 years now for the Giants. By points per game, they were 15th, they were 30th, they were 30th, and this year they're 22nd. He has not been the offensive coordinator of an offense that has scored in the top half of the league in 4 seasons. All different kinds of quarterbacks, all different kinds of receivers, 4 seasons, hasn't done it. Now, I consider myself to be someone that is a ball knower, and I understand that analytically, the Giants this year in EPA, which is expected points added, they're 12th in EPA this year, offensively. And since, and that's including the Russell Wilson starts, since Jackson Dart took over in week 4, and including the Russell Wilson games, they're better than 12th in EPA per play. So I understand the Giants have a good offense this year, right? And especially when you take into account the injuries to Cam Scadaboo and Malik Neighbors, they've done a very good job offensively this year. But Mike Kafka's not been the offensive coordinator of this juggernaut offense in his time in East Rutherford. It's been a very, very middling to bad offense in his time here. So, again, what qualifies him? I saw something on Twitter the other day that said, well, get him a good defensive coordinator. It's the same thing as Dable. You know, when Dable had Wink Martindale, he went 9-7, and then he went 6-11. He was basically a 500 coach with Wink Martindale. Without Wink Martindale, he went like 5-20. So why should we trust Mike Kafka to hire the right defensive coordinator? I mean, how do we know he's going to do that? So to me, he shouldn't be in consideration for the head coaching job. But, of course, there's a but with the Giants. And the but is, what is the coaching search actually going to look like? And the thought I had the other day that was a scary thought is, what if Mike Kafka actually is the best we can hope for in the Giant coaching search? And obviously I just went on a rant why I wouldn't hire Mike Kafka, and I would not. But if you listen to reports, Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post reported this. And again, I'm not saying this is gospel. I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm just saying what's being reported. Lou Anarumo, the former defensive coordinator of the Bengals, the current defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts, who has a relationship with Joe Schoen, who currently is still employed as general manager. He is the slight favorite to become the head coach. Lou Anarumo would excite me zero. He would not excite me at all. Okay, he coordinated in a Super Bowl with the Bengals, but the Bengals honestly always had defensive problems. Really, I mean, I know he had a couple good defenses, but it always felt like they were not good defenses. It always felt like they didn't win because of their defenses in Cincinnati. So, if you're going to ask me who would I rather have between Mike Kafka and Lou Anarumo, I probably would have Mike Kafka. So that's why the Giant coaching search, the question really boils down to, do they run a real search? If they run a real search and they try to get the best candidate is not Mike Kafka or Lou Anarumo. I'm just kind of speaking out loud here that if the Giants kind of run a search where they're looking for people that they're familiar with, and oh, he's got a relationship with Shane, and Mara knows him, and they interviewed him for the head coaching job a few years ago, whatever. If that's the kind of search we're going to have, Mike Kafka might be the lesser of two evils, if you will. He might be the best option because he's an offensive mind. He clearly is working pretty well with Dart. Now, obviously, Dable gets credit for that as well. But, I mean, the offense, as I mentioned, has been good this year. It hadn't been good previously, but it has been good this year analytically. So, you'd at least be hiring an offensive coach. And obviously, we know defensive coaches, it's an uphill climb, right? You look around the league, who are the defensive coaches really succeeding? Sean McDermott in Buffalo succeeds, but he has the best quarterback in the league, basically, right? D'Amico Ryans, he's done well in Houston, but again, I'm not sure Houston is a juggernaut team, someone who's going to win a Super Bowl or even compete for a Super Bowl. It's not easy with a defensive coach. Todd Bowles in Tampa, they're kind of like 500 every year. The best coaches in the league are offensive coaches. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, John Harbaugh is a good coach. He's a special teams guy. But the point is, most of the good coaches in the league are offensive coaches. So, to me, I wouldn't hire Anarumo or Kafka. But to me, I just have been thinking that if we're going on kind of the lesser of two evils here, it might be Mike Kafka if it comes down to a race between those two guys for the job. And so now we'll get into the Mets a little bit with Nimmo, the beloved Met, Brandon Nimmo, getting traded for Marcus Semien. Kind of a rare trade, when you look at an MLB for MLB player getting moved like that to established veteran players. That's pretty interesting. Here are my overall thoughts on the Nimmo Semien move. So, just some background. Nimmo has, I believe, about 5 years remaining on his deal, and I think he makes about $20 million a year. So he's got about $500 left on his contract, and Semien has 3 years, $72 million left before he's a free agent. So, okay, so the Mets, they kind of shave a couple years, right? Similar AAV, average annual value. They shave a couple years off the deal. But you kind of ask yourself, what's the point of this deal? What is the why trade Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Simeon? Yeah, it kind of feels like you're kind of moving sideways a little bit. Here's the reasoning that the Mets did this. The Mets last year were not a great defensive team. If you look at them in like defensive runs saved, I think they were middle of the pack. They were not a great defensive team. And Nimmo himself last year was a below average defender. He was close to average, but a little bit below average in terms of like outs above average and other analytic metrics. So the Mets want to get better defensively, so they ship out Nimmo because they obviously have Pete Alonso as a free agent as well, and he's not the greatest defender. He's gotten better, but he's not the greatest defender. So the rumor was, okay, you got to ship out one of them, and you ship out Nimmo. The reason I find this interesting, at least from a Yankee perspective, is a lot of Met fans now think, well, we're going to go out and get Cody Bellinger. We're going to we're going to double dip and get another Yankee free agent. Obviously, last year they got Soto. This year they get Bellinger. The thing that I don't really understand about the Bellinger versus Nimmo thing, and I was kind of talking about this the other day with some people. I don't think Nimmo is really a substantial downgrade from Bellinger. I think Bellinger's the better player. Don't get me wrong. But I think Bellinger's going to get paid more money, right? He's going to get a bigger contract than $595 or $500, whatever Nimmo had left. And I don't think he's a substantially better player. He's a better fielder, but I don't think he's a substantially better player. Like, if you look at his last 3 years by OPS plus, he was 139 in 2023, 111, and 125 in terms of OPS plus. And if you look at Nimmo for comparison in the same metric, he was 128, 106, 114. Again, Bellinger's better. Is he that much better? Is he better by like a substantial margin? I don't really think he is. So I think when you look at the idea that, well, we're gonna swap out Nimmo and bring in Bellinger, I'm not quite sure how much better that makes the team, I guess is my point. Like, okay, you have Brandon Nimmo now, you have Cody Bellinger now and not Brandon Nimmo. Like, how does that make you that much better? So I do wonder what's up there. I do think the Mets have another big move in them. I think it's pretty obvious that they're preparing for an offseason of change after they underachieved last year, missing the postseason. I think they are going to make changes. You're seeing it already. But I'm not quite sure if the pivot for them is Brandon Nimmo. If the pivot for them is Cody Bellinger, does that really make a ton of sense? You're going to pay him more, and while he is a better player, I just don't think he's like that much better. I think he's marginally a better player. So it'll be interesting to see if the Mets are now major players in the Bellinger market, because obviously the Yankees are going to be interested in Bellinger. It's been reported that he's kind of their top target to bring back, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens there, because the Yankees are a team that I think is really I think they really want to bring Bellinger back, and I think it's a situation where he's going to have a lot of suitors, and it's going to be a market that I think is not just, okay, the Yankees make a good offer, he's back. I think there's going to be a lot of different teams kind of in the running for him, and the Mets now might be in the running for him after this Brandon Nimmo trade. So that's about all I got. Definitely try to do more of these, and definitely try to kind of keep it a little broader with the New York sports topics. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Have a great week off. Enjoy time with family, and I will